started as people are coming in. And you have found yourself in a webinar, whether you intended to or not. You are here. We're going to be talking about homegrown discipleship and really the specifics around this challenge and inadequacy and responsibility of discipleship as a family. Um, and probably a topic that's not often talked about, and where there probably is a lot of mystery and maybe even frustration. And so I love that David Sunde is with us. He's a friend of mine, and has contributed some really beautiful works, resources. His first book, which I endorse, called The Small Batch Discipleship, is something you should pick up. And then his recent book, Homegrown Discipleship, is that what it is? Disciples? Absolutely.
Disciple.
Is all about this. So after this webinar, you're gonna want to dig in even further. And Nav Press, I think, published that. And
Mhm.
so uh, two really killer resources. And David Sunday has graduated. I'm going to try to say this correctly. A doctorate in s- some semiotics,
Semiotics.
semiotics, and culture and church. And that just makes you want to have a conversation with him to figure out what in the world is going on in his head. So um, he's done a lot of intentional work on his soul and as a practitioner in the world. And so that's why we're glad to have him here. He's not just a thinker, he's a doer. And um, we're going to get into this. So I'm going to give you the opportunity later in the webinar to ask some questions. So if you can drop, not in the chat function, but in the Q&A function, any questions that come up for you as we're talking, we'll get to them a little later. So just drop them in there. We can visit those together. David, thanks for being with us. I want to know what we're talking about, why this homegrown and discipleship is important, what it's about, why it comes up for you, what you've noticed. Just let's open up space a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm such a fan of what you and Tanya are doing on the island, and I am an alumni of the Caneo Center, and so I'm a big fan of that as a retreat for anyone who is not even weary or wounded, but just needs some Sabbath. And
Mm,
so it's fun to be able to reconnect with you. Um,
yeah.
Real quick, semiotics, I had to Google it. It is the study of signs, images, symbols, and story and language. And because culture is evolving at such a rapid rate, we need like the tribe of Issachar, men
Mm,
who know the signs and know what to do about them. That comes from Second
mm,
Chronicles chapter 12. Uh,
yeah.
my concern was, what do we do in an increasingly post-Christian West? How do we exist as the church? What are
Mm,
the signs around us? And oh, by the way, one of the big signs that we see today is where the church is flourishing the most is where there's no religious freedom. Where the church is
mm,
suffering the most is where there's
mm,
limitless religious freedom. My family comes
yeah.
from Norway, and they are probably a generation ahead of us, post-Christian. They have a national holiday called Ascension Day. And if you ask, your average Norwegian might not even know who ascended on Ascension Day. Uh,
Mm,
so that was part of my curiosity in this.
yeah.
And I got to study with Leonard Sweet for 3 years, and it was game changing intellectually, but spiritually and relationally. So in that time of getting my doctorate, I wanted to write this book because it wasn't a victory lap for me. It was more of a statement about who I was raised by.
Mm,
My mom immigrated from occupied Norway during World War II, couldn't speak a word of English. We grew
mm,
up in San Francisco, um, in basically a first and second generation immigrant church in the heart of the city, in the Mission District.
yeah.
And it was every tribe and every tongue. It was very diverse, but it had a blue collar sensibility. And what was
Hmm.
unique about it, it was like an extended family of faith. I had aunts and uncles on my mom's side who knew my aunts and uncles on my dad's side. But here's the thing that I got is my parents had a very vibrant faith. My dad was a journeyman carpenter who became a dentist, got tired of being a businessman in the city, sold his practice so he could go on a mercy ship for 2 months every year, uh,
Oh, wow.
basically doing the work of evangelism. But um, he came from a broken home and didn't really find Christ. He was a student at UC Berkeley in the 50s, and his roommate invited him to this. Oh, there's a guy holding a series of meetings at the Cow Palace, and it was Billy Graham. And then and so he found Christ in his 20s, and it was a game changer for him.
Hmm.
And that was the thing that I realized going into college. So much of who my dad was, I was trying to do what he did. I was studying to be a dentist. He never encouraged it. He said, when you come home for the summers, you should work the trade. The reason I bring that all up, and my mom was just a lay person in the church, but she was hosting Bible studies for 140 women from all denominations, and she didn't have any teaching gifts. She just had gifts of hospitality. Our home was always open to people who were in need of housing, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden, it shaped desires, and that was the big thing. We've
Okay.
made so much of discipleship about cognition. And when we make it so much about cognition, the average Christian ends up feeling like they don't know enough. When we make it so much about practice and disciplines and behavior, most Christians end up feeling like they're not good enough or inadequate. Like I
Hmm.
should be had more quiet time, or I should pray more, or something more.
Yes.
But what the neuroscience says is that the way we shape character and specifically desire is through imitation. So
Hmm.
this is what sets parents up as the primary, whether they feel qualified or not, disciple making presence. And it's not about hosting family devotions and trying to find them inspirational.
I
Oh, let's
see.
pull out the Bible at the table and I'm not against that. I'm just saying there's a way to incarnate, to embody faith
Yes.
in different ways.
That's good.
So I think most Christians struggle with feeling like I should be doing more, or maybe I don't feel equipped. And I would simply say one of the most natural feelings in the world for any Christian, but certainly any parent, is to feel stuck.
Hmm.
And I would say rather than stuck, I would say, I think you might be in a growing pain. That's a reframing. Rather than something's wrong, actually, we're going through a tension, a season, and any living organism goes through growing pains. So it's like an appetite. There were times where, as a kid, my favorite meal was a Big Mac. I can't remember the last time I've had a Big Mac or ate at McDonald's. My appetite has changed. And so spiritually, and especially as we go through seasons of our kids' lives, there is going to always feel like we're stuck. And I would just reframe it as part of the growing process.
Hmm.
And then the other thing that I wanted to address is if you're part of a missional community, the question is always, what do we do with our kids? And so this book wasn't written as a victory lap, like, oh, it's a success story of how our kids turned out, though I love who they're becoming as 20 somethings. It was birthed out of a missional community that we ran for 7 years, where we said, what would it look like if church felt a little bit more like a laboratory than a lecture? And that had two pieces to it. Number one, we said, I think today most people are institutionally averse, but they're all
Hmm.
spiritually hungry. So, how do we make faith and community accessible to people whose first step is not likely going to be into our living room Bible study or our worship service?
Hmm.
But the second part of that is I wanted to create an embodied faith opportunity for parents um, to disciple their kids. So, the first Sunday of every month, it was church's lab, and we would make faith and community accessible. But I'd send out an email. And I would tell them, here's why we do what we do. Here's two of the rhythms that we're focusing on this week. Here's who we're partnering with, usually across social divides. But here's how to pray for it. Here's how to invite for it. So our kids were, we said, we don't believe in Sunday school. We believe in laboratories. And we wanted our kids to be able to walk through that in a more incarnational practice. So
Mm,
I would say just simply a couple of things, and then I look forward to just having a little more conversation. Number one, I wanted to present spiritual leadership, especially at home, more as a chain of care than a chain of command.
okay.
Because the goal of any hierarchy is to project strength and minimize weaknesses and mistakes, which is also what makes hierarchy so prone to blame and hypocrisy. Um,
Mm,
and so I like to say, rather than um, make strength your strength, make vulnerability your strength. I, I was listening to this young dad we were at a small group, and it was an honest confession, but he had four boys under the age of 10 years old. And his prayer request at the end was, guys, would you just pray for my kids are getting the best of me. I just need God to make me more patient. And I didn't know him well enough to go up, kind of encourage him. I was like, I don't think this is a patience issue. I think this is a grace issue. Don't try and be perfect to your kids. Seed eternity in their hearts by confessing desire.
mm,
And so, what I like to liberate parents from is feeling like they need to lead from a place of strength. Because guess what? We live in proximity and family. No one needs to tell, well, I'm not perfect. No one is saying you are or thinks you are. And everyone's
right.
got the receipts to show it.
Yeah.
But when we confess, I think that's our greatest strength. The second thing I wanted to make parents aware of is relational disciple making is really a two-way street. Unlike when you volunteer to teach at a Sunday school, that is a one-way street. Like if you're in second grade teaching Sunday school boys or whatever, oh my gosh, that is a one-way street. But here's the thing. When we step into what God's doing, we always all of a sudden awaken to the reality of God discipling us, disciple them. God raising us, raise them. In fact, I opened
Mm,
the book sharing this idea. When my daughter was born, I was so worried about what her earliest memory would be, and raising her in a pastor's home that I started creating a journal for her. Because I knew at one point, probably when she hit her teenage years, my words would fall flat. Words would fail us. And I wanted her have her a record of some of her earliest memories before she could even remember. But I also had this sense that God's saying, because I wanted to be Christ to her, not just a Sunday go to church faith.
hmm
And he said, you got it half right. He says, I want to reveal who I am through her, so take notes. So for 13 years, I
Oh,
kept
wow.
writing as a discipline of saying, God, I think you're discipling me as I'm trying to disciple her. And so for 13 years, I wrote to her in that vein. Um, and if there's one thing I would encourage parents to do is to notice all the ways that the Father is shaping our hearts as we invest in them.
Mm,
Um, and then I and we can talk about this a little bit more, but I outlined
yeah.
7 rhythms, incarnational practices that I think shape desire, but I like to distinguish between the hard and the soft skills of Jesus. Both are needed, but they're learned differently. So
Mm,
I think the church is by and large really good at teaching the hard skills. They teach us knowledge. They teach us practices. They mobilize us in volunteering, maybe in missions, all the things that kind of cultivate giving in us, all the things that are kind of helpful and needed. But we're all familiar with the phrase, some things are caught more than taught. That's a
hmm
relational statement. So where do we pick up the sense of empathy? Or where do we
mm,
cultivate discernment? How do we learn compassion, not as seeing ourselves as more privileged, but seeing others' needs as simply different than our own? But we're all needy.
Hmm.
Those are things that I'm trying to use the rhythms to shape desire. And so this is just kind of ways that we can experience the heart of the Father, leverage faith for the benefit of others, but, and this is the key, reproduce faith in those closest. I've said a lot, but I'll just kind of
Good,
pull over
good,
here.
David. Yeah, I got a lot of things I want to pull out a little bit. Is so you're it sounds like you're moving the target that people would measure, for lack of a better term, what they're cultivating, seeking to cultivate in their kids. You know, you used empathy and compassion,
Yeah.
um, and speak a bit more about kind of our impulse to zero in on particular things that we want to see developed in our kids versus maybe some more um, Jesus centered or kingdom characters that we're longing to see gardened in our kids' soul.
You use the word measure, and man, we got to be careful when we use that word. I understand the heart of that because I'm a
Mm,
results-oriented person. But here's
yeah.
what's unique. I think the church is largely able to measure results.
Hmm.
How many chapters did we get through? How many people signed up? How many people attended? How much giving? Like results are important. We kind of need to know where
Yeah.
we stand. But when it comes to relational disciple making, really what we're looking to do is evaluate or measure fruit. Results are what happen outside of us performatively, but
Yeah.
fruit is what happens inside of us.
Side. Yeah.
And so when we walk alongside people, namely our children, I can observe stuff in you, the shaping of your heart, shaping of desires, attitudes, priorities, the things that are shifting, and I can observe fruit more than I can just see simple results. Oh, good. Thank you. You shared with your sister. No, actually, I see love and compassion towards a younger sister. Oh,
Mm,
and now, and this is spiritual leadership. I talk about spiritual leadership as like 2 degrees. I don't need you to be a different person. I just need you to try this in the 2 degrees because 2 degrees over 20 years is life changing. And when we speak to potential, you know what I see in you? And we start to see Christ in them in particular ways. People want to arise to the occasion. People are inspired by when we speak to potential, especially our kids, especially
mm,
before the age of 12, when the parents are the best and most influential show in town.
hmm. That's good. David, when it comes to the caught but not taught,
Yeah.
is I'm wondering if there is, and maybe this isn't necessarily taught, but are there ways that you name overtly, not rather than just covertly name things you're seeing come forth in your kids? Like that was that was an act of love. That was so responsible for you to pick that up when no one else did. Do you name those things or do you let them just perceive you know, how delighted you are? Help me with that a little bit.
Well, one of the things we had a phrase in our family, and we just said, save your best for family. Because isn't it true that the people that we love the most, that we feel the most safe with, become the proverbial cat that we kick because we had a long or stressful day?
Yeah, yeah,
And so we would say, let's save our best for family, believing that if everyone at home got our best, not just the bank teller or the waitress or the customer or the client or the parishioner, whatever, we didn't just fake it all day and come home and take it out on those we love the most. I
yeah.
remember coming home one night from a stressful day. My son, who was like 10 at the time, who is such a good kid, um, and has enough people pleasing, but enough character to just be really sensitive to these things. I snapped at him because he didn't listen the first time.
Mm,
We gathered for dinner and I circled back and I said, Bjorn, I need to own something. what you didn't merit that reaction. Dad, it's okay. I didn't listen the first time. And I said, thank you, but I'm not just going to apologize. I need you to forgive me because I wanted to engage consent. I
Mm,
didn't want to allow him to just enable that behavior in me, but I also wanted to have freedom, like for him to go, no, Dad, it's okay. I forgive you. Now,
yeah.
there was an idea, and I didn't necessarily want them to go into vocational ministry. This, I wanted them to feel like ministers who put the divine on display uh, in a marketplace setting. And I remember my son, he was at Texas A&M University, which up until 1960 was a military school. So it has a very strong patriotic culture. He's an engineer. And I remember him coming, he was having a hard time finding an internship and then a job. And it was like in his junior year, he says, Dad, all all of the people that are coming are offering jobs in defense contract. And I was like, well, son, those are good jobs. They're stable, they're well paying. And he goes, Dad, I don't want to design missiles. And I was
Mm,
like, why didn't I think of that? Like, and I'm not against defense contractors or anything, but for
sure.
his heart to be
Yeah.
shaped and then to speak into mine, I was like,
Mm,
here I'm thinking about his safety, his provision, like, and I was like,
sure.
God has already shaped his heart. Now, my daughter is
Yeah.
23 and she's a NICU nurse. Um, and she's sharing these stories where she's like, um, she comes home in tears and says, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Mm,
And she feels like she gets to work in a most fragile place, both physically, she's got like a 1.5 pound baby, and with fragile parents. About a month ago,
mm,
she came home and she had been with this family for 3.5 weeks. And in the middle of the night, the baby was had to be intubated. And the mom called out for the chaplain and she says, Dad, the chaplain came down and it was like they didn't know what to do. And the mom asked if she could be if the son could be baptized. And could Annika do it? And
wow.
and so Annika goes and grabs two Christian nursing friends. They lay hands on him. They baptize him. Well, then the next day he succumbed to the injuries and he died. But a week and a half later, she was a pallbearer at the funeral. And all the
Mm,
art was her art that she had created in the NICU. And so she's teaching me about what it means to have kind
yeah.
of this kingdom orientation that we get to usher in heaven on earth where the brokenness, death was
Mm,
never supposed to be part of the human equation.
hmm.
So that's kind of I'm just
Yeah.
reflecting on some of those tender moments where my kids
Yes.
are speaking back to me. I'm like, oh, they picked up on stuff
Yeah.
like they've kind of passed me in some ways.
Yeah. So, okay. David, the way that you're kind of flipping the script that you are also being discipled as you disciple. Tell me a bit about how that has challenged your ego and maybe created some tension for you.
Well, um, you know,
You're a
uh,
beautiful soul, David. I know that, but I also know.
well, sure. Maybe family is like and parenting is the last best place to grow up, right?
Mm,
Because there's no pretense. You can't fake it,
right,
for
right.
better or for worse. And so when I started out saying earlier, I think spiritual leadership is more of a chain of care than it is command. I don't have to lead from a place of being right.
Mm,
And so I've tried to, maybe one way I've tried to say it is, the older I get, the more secure I'm getting with my insecurities. And I'm okay to tell on myself.
mm,
I have a counselor and he says, David, what you never learn to name, you'll never learn to own. And what you can't own, you cannot steward. And I was like,
right.
hold on. And I had to write it down.
Yeah.
And he says, the reverse is also true. And I was like, wait, you're like, I literally writing that. And he goes, what you never name, you never own. And what you never own, you'll never be able to steward. And
Mm,
so the things that, being in ministry, I call it death by a thousand cuts. You know,
Yes.
disappointment is cumulative,
Hmm.
stress is cumulative. It
Hmm.
just is a fatiguing thing. And so I need to name stuff so that I can own my part in it. And if I can own
Yes.
my part in it, then I feel like it becomes more fertile ground for me to grow from.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's a lifelong pursuit. But
Yes.
with my kids, I tried to just name stuff with them where I wish I could have handled things better.
Mm. Yeah. So you're breaking open space through through confession, and that's uh, probably not been the parenting advice that most get is to lead with some vulnerability and weakness. And that's probably created a much stronger bond and connection and trust uh, with you and your kids. How do you feel like, David, this situates right now amidst the concern around deconstruction
Mm.
and how, young people are leaving the church in droves
Yeah.
for legitimate and some illegitimate reasons, but they are leaving. And
Yeah.
there's this kind of, uh, buckle down and like, how do we stop this from happening? And all the blame is on them. It's because they're questioning. How does this homegrown discipleship kind of address that, or maybe kind of be in the midst of what's going on right now?
Yeah. And this is where my story about growing up in San Francisco, I'm going to say something that sounds a little odd as a white male, but I felt like I was more or less a minority growing up in the public schools in San Francisco. I was
Hmm.
not the prevailing ethnic, religious, economic class. And when you start there, you learn to make a lower level of assumption around diversity. And that was really formative for me. So you end up
Mm,
developing sort of a minority perspective. Now, I say that I lived for 6 years and the kids were born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which there is a cultural Christianity there that everyone just assumes you have a church home.
sure.
We'd been in Austin, Texas for 20 years, and we raised the kids in public schools, but it was a largely affluent area. And one of the things I used to always say is, this is not normal. Um, and and we were very intentional about how we crossed social divides. And I
Mm,
would bring them into places. And again, I have a couple of sayings like, we're going to make community or make awkward look effortless. We're because being awkward by myself sucks. But when we're
yeah.
awkward in relationship with our friends or family, it becomes memory building moments. We can laugh at
Mm,
it later or we can cringe at it later. So we were constantly doing things with a community of refugees. We helped plant a
mm,
Burmese church. There were. I've been in more refugee apartments here, and those are some of the thick community friends that I still hold on
yeah.
to. But then we started hosting events with a foster care transitional home and just being very intentional with learning names and then allowing them to get outside of their bubble. And
Mm,
then we would say, you know what? We get to enjoy what we create. So if you want to have an enemy at home, um, that's on you. But if you want to have a friend at home in your sister
mhm,
or your brother, then you get to enjoy what you create. But then we wouldn't just hire things out. We would do yard work together so that we could
mhm,
enjoy movies and pizza, or so that we could enjoy
mhm,
trips. Like
yeah.
and so we were always just trying to create and reframe kind of a rhythm of gratitude and what that looks like. Saying, you know what, there's always going to be people with more, and there's always going to be people with less. But look how good we have it because we have each
Mhm,
other.
mhm. It's good. So you're you're talking about this, um, maybe exposure is not the best word, but the tendency in facing deconstruction is a fear response, and that is we need to protect our kids
Yes.
as much as possible. And then there's probably a very libertine kind of like passive response of just like, um, and you're talking about like taking them on mission with you, immersing
Yeah.
together. Um, and tell me what it looks like to like bring mission, bring your kids on mission with you to help
Yeah.
them rather than bring the idea of bringing them to church is how we would think of instilling faith in our kids. Like what is it, how does faith get cultivated outside the church on mission?
Well, as I shared, we tried to move from what I would call service projects because those are good on-ramps, but they're not as formative into
Yes.
strategic relationships so that we actually knew people. I joked, it's not that the haves don't care about the have-nots, it's that we don't know them. But we're all needy. So, but I would take a step back and say, not just crossing social divides with my kids or bringing them to developing countries or whatever. In our prayer lives, it's interesting to think about it this way. We often start our prayer lives in a very infant way, and we ask God for stuff. But the further we go, we start asking God about stuff. In the same way, like when my kids were young, it was like, Dad, can I have dessert? Can I do a sleepover? Dad, can we stop for a Slurpee on the way home? Dad, you know, can I have $1 or can I go to the snack bar? But then the older they get, they start asking us about things. Dad, why do some families get divorced? Dad, what happens when you die? Dad, why are we at war? Dad, why do we think and believe the way we do? Okay, this is engagement. This is the Sunday school that we all could dream for, right? And so in our prayer times, and I outlined 4 windows based on Deuteronomy 6, as relational, ordinary, daily, and let's just be honest, inevitable windows to kind of capture the presence of God or to sense the kingdom of God. And it's morning time, drive time, meal time, and bedtime. And each of those have kind of a presence of their own. We talked about mourning as a daily commissioning, reminding them who and whose they are. Well, we talked about bedtime as this kind of a sacred liturgy or a ritual that for us, it involves, when they were younger, singing. It would involve prayer, maybe a little of the Jesus Storybook Bible. But as they got older, especially into adolescence, that time with the lights out was the most verbal time of particularly our son's day. He would
Yeah.
think out loud with us and ask a lot of the why questions. But even in our prayers, and they knew some of the families we were involved with, I would make prayer requests known about who's struggling in marriage, who's looking for work. I wanted to engage them, not in a fearful way, but in a petitioning, God, we need your help in these things. So I didn't want to sterilize the messiness. We need the Lord. We need to depend on the Lord for these things.
Mhm.
Um, and so those were 4 windows. So drive time, I remember feeling liberated when the kids started getting driver's license because, oh my gosh, I wasn't the Uber service anymore, except that I lost the
Yeah.
kind of informal space of thinking out loud. And one of the
Yeah.
things statements I make is um, uh, whenever we gain something, we also lose something. And that's un-American. We think of accumulation. We think of more is better. But with each season, there is going to be a loss. Oh, I love that they're more independent. Oh, I miss that they're so independent. They
Mm-hmm.
don't need me as much as maybe I need them now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Those, David, those 4 things are so helpful. And they are these little thin places
Yes.
that I've sensed them. I know how something starts to open up at bedtime and in the car, and I didn't realize what was going on there. But there's these are these little kingdom intersections with our kids, and that imagination, that as Jesus would say, have eyes to see and ears to hear. That's what these things are. They're not just inconveniences to get our kid across town or
Yeah, we think in the big
uh,
blocks. We think about
yeah,
like get to work or get to school or
yeah,
get to practice or what. And I'm like, this is the liminal spaces, the transitional times, and God's in the midst of those. Uh,
yes,
and it's like some of the richest times at church is what happens outside of the liturgy or
yeah,
the worship because
yeah.
you're reconnecting with deep friendship or you're at a retreat or like it's something in the in between, not the big thing.
Tell me a little, Dave. This is, man, I want to like dig into those. There's this. Tell me a bit about. So this book is not a. It's not a book of how to develop a children's ministry, right? It's about transformation and discipleship in the ordinary in many ways. And um, talk to me about this tension of like, how do we do kids? How do we? It comes at me in multiple ways, but how do we take care of kids? How do we have children's ministry? How do we integrate kids like in church that's non-traditional, like how, in a more missional or incarnational church? Like, what do we do with kids? I guess is the phrase that I have all the time, and that's probably because it was really clean and really fit in a really sweet category. Is you drop your kids off for an hour and a half, and someone has a program and takes care of them. And so now we're moving into the ordinary, and like, how does that work here? Does it work here? Let's give me some of
So for
your
parents at
thinking
home,
here.
I would say these four windows are opportunities where you don't have to be um, you don't need a seminary degree to guide these moments.
Yes.
And I think God has been writing a story in us, and a lot of times what parents really struggle with is what we all struggle with is how do we put words to what we feel on a deep level. So
Okay.
I tried to take these four windows and give seven what I would call incarnational rhythms, where it gives parents fresh language to talk about the heart of the Father and the desires of their heart. And this was just a conversational way to talk about generosity. Oh, well, we don't give to save anyone. We give to save ourselves from believing what we think we deserve, what God's already provided. Or hospitality. We were always inviting people over, but I was like, we're going to invite people over and make room for people that might not ever invite us back. But we need you to be
Mm,
a part of that. And so, Baron, I need you to
mm,
blow the leaves. And Annika, can you clean up the bathroom? And then we're all going to go to Costco and shop or what? There was something very intentional about how we practiced these rhythms.
yeah.
Um, when you go into a church environment and now you're trying to scale it, like how do we multiply this for others? And I would say language shapes culture, just like it does at home. I would stop ever using the word volunteer. In fact, in our church,
Mhm.
our missional community, it was no. We would dismiss them as part of but these were the people that were apprenticing our kids today.
Mhm.
Because apprenticing, the rhythm of it was always having someone further along, but always bringing someone along. I think that's what we're looking because other we have to eliminate the concept of arrival.
I see.
And so I wanted people to see that their involvement in ministry was about spiritual reproduction. When Tim Elmore discipled me 30 years ago, when I was, finishing up college and I was in San Diego, he he said, David, I think you have a lot going for you. I don't really want to teach you anything new. I just want to make sure you know how to give it away. I was like,
Hmm.
whoa. So that doesn't sound like more knowledge. That doesn't sound like act better. That sounds reproductive. And if I was to identify the church's cough, uh, a nice way of saying dilemma, a cough is a good sign. When you see someone that can't cough, you know they're suffocating, right? If you've ever had to do a
Sure.
Heimlich maneuver, I was trained in rescue
Yeah.
breathing. I'm a former lifeguard, but um, the church is coughing, which means there's still breath, but it's not breathing healthily. And here's the problem. Most discipleship ends with the last chapter. And what I mean by that is we get to the last chapter and there's no expectation to go and do likewise. There's no
I
expectation
see.
for
Yep.
commissioning and sending. And so we kind of get to the end of small group in May and go, let's sign up again in the fall.
Hmm.
And I would say, can we move the needle? Can we cast vision for now that you've been entrusted with this? Can you impart it somehow? Or what if just in every Sunday saying, what one part about this week's message are you going to give away this week?
Hmm.
And this is the picture of parenting. Listen, if I'm not creating my kids to not need me, I'm creating codependency.
Right. Yes.
Like I have to launch them, I have to send them. And it doesn't mean I've arrived. It just means that at some point they need to get out of the nest and adult on their own. But
Yes.
I want them to have a flavor, a radar for the kingdom. I use the analogy of AA and recovery ministry. Um, we all know step one, admit you've got a problem and you're powerless to do anything. And then it's about 10 steps of making amends because the addiction spoke louder than the intention.
Mm.
But the genius of a recovery is step 12, sponsorship.
Right.
You're still going to be tempted. You're still going to have to make amends for messed up relationship. You're still going to struggle. But the way you work out your sobriety is go find someone
Mm.
at step one. And I'm saying if the church would
So good.
would work out their salvation like an addict works out their sobriety, I think we'd have an awakening. And
Yeah.
this is what it means. Like we have to have the end sight in mind of sending, commissioning, go and do likewise.
Yeah. So a
So
lot of
that's how I would set it up for churches.
yeah,
What's the end
yeah,
game?
yeah, absolutely. I use the language of spectatoritis, which is how so much of our uh, way we do church has created spectators. And so then when we're surprised that they um, become disillusioned and deconstruct, it's because they never really moved beyond that movie theater, not necessarily literally in church, but like spectator position.
Yeah.
The ways that we allow and permit and make space for and equip children to be not spectators but contributors. Tell me a little bit about how that can look or did look for you in your church, or like what you've seen. Um, Curious about
I'll
that.
give you a couple of just anecdotes, and I think these are included
Yeah.
in the book. I remember doing this series for a group of families called the Animated Gospel According to Pixar, and I took a bunch of and I just created family nights, kind of a DIY for family, and one of them was Up, which is such a tearjerker, and it's so beautiful. Um, but at the end of it, I had gone around to there's a place at Rudy's Barbecue, and they just have this collection of bottle caps. And when Russell didn't have anyone to award him his final badge, he awarded him the Ellie badge because Russell, the Boy Scout, had changed his perspective. This old curmudgeon
Mm.
of a man, and he'd given him kind of new life. And I wanted our parents. So at the end of our time, we took ribbon and a glue gun, and we took these bottle caps. And I encouraged them to watch the movie. And at the end of the movie, to speak into their kids' lives. You know how I
Mm,
see you becoming, you know how you have shaped my, I want to give you this badge, kind of an award them, make it a
I
formal
love
but
it.
a funny kind of homespun thing. Another one we did was because had this partnership with this foster care group, we were just hosting parties constantly for the sake of others. Churches are good at throwing parties for themselves and hoping others come. Um, but they had about 14 kids between the ages of 7 and 17. And we, for about $200, rented an outdoor um, laser tag. And I said, please don't see this as us and them. We're mixing the teams, but we met a half hour before, and I just painted a picture for our kids. And I said, here's what's happening today. This is the kind of home life that I helped them understand. I said, today, here's your assignment. I want you to learn a kid's name. I want you to use that kid's name so that they can hear it. Speak it back to them because everyone loves hearing their own name. They feel known.
Hmm.
And then thirdly, as a family, I want you to pray for that name all week long. Well, we finished playing and then we had some popsicles and stuff. And I just broke them up into family groups with a list of 5 questions so that each family was kind of just entertaining. And it was silly. If you had a superpower, what would be,
Sure.
but I wanted to give the kids some kind of agency. So it's kind of at each step. Now, when they got into teen years, well, now I was entrusting them with more. I
Mm,
wanted to give our kids some kind of
mhm.
growing responsibility to guide and to lead other things, whether it be helping with children or coordinating some of our labs, that kind of stuff.
Mm. Those are beautiful, David. The way that you're dignifying um, children in their role within the kingdom of God is just really it's refreshing and so cool. Um, and we did some of those things in our own 15-year church planning experience of and there is a feeling for a lot of people, and help me with this a little, is that I'm with my kids all week long, and I need a break from them. I just want to dump them off and get away from church might be my only babysitting space. And I'm saying that a little bit pejoratively, but
Yeah,
um, because I've gotten some pushback on the integration of children in uh, church life because of that. And so,
yeah.
tell me, have you heard some of that, and how do you address that?
Yeah. I remember one mom who had 3 kids. She wouldn't volunteer, but she was willing to be a cheerleader mom and a Cub Scout mom or a Girl Scout mom. I
Mm,
was like,
mm,
hold on. Though that's like full-time job right there. And
yeah,
so yes, we had the sort of pushback. I wasn't too concerned if a parent didn't want to help in children's ministry. I just want them to treat the community as not so where are you going to give? Part of what it means to be in community is not only finding our contribution, but we also learn our potential because people are seeing
yes,
stuff in us. So I was okay if every parent didn't serve in children's. I didn't want to mandate that like some edict from
yes,
on high. Um,
yes.
But when it came to the rhythms and the labs, I was very instructional with how to pray for this, how to talk to your kids about this, why we do church the way we do, and and then um, how to invite for it. I wanted them to be the primary spiritual leader for those lab events, and we were just going to find other people to cover us. We dismissed after the worship, and they would go for about 45 minutes and have kind of a more of a children's specific message,
Hmm.
oftentimes around our rhythms or our expressions, but we wanted them to have relational encounters with people that were different than their own.
That's good.
Um, I,
Now,
oh, go
David,
ahead.
yeah, no, keep going. That's good.
Well, I tried to like integrate it more and try not to make it an either or. So
Yes.
During Lent, we did a thing called the new normal. We typically think of Lent like it's, I didn't grow up with an observance of Lent, but rather than just, buying a new shirt and a new dress for, Easter Sunday, let's prepare for new life. So we would be intentional. And historically, Lent is about prayer, it's about fasting, and it's about the needs among us. So as a new normal, we invited all of our families to fast ordinary and uh, purchases. So it would be like if you're going to go out to pizza or dinner, everyone order water and just keep a running total of whatever you saved on Cokes and beers or whatever. If rather than stop at for Starbucks, just drink office brew or whatever. Rather than
Hmm.
going to the car wash, wash your own car. But for these 40 days, let's just as families save up. And we're going to be praying about the needs among us. And then we had everyone turn all their receipts in, and we're a small missional community, less than 100 people, but we would get like 1,500 bucks. And then on Easter Sunday, we would pass out kind of either we gave out gift cards from local grocery store, and we gave out just $50 bills in an envelope.
Hmm.
And I said, I'm buying your story. I don't just hand it out the window at a guy at a stoplight. I want you to pull over and learn a name, learn a story. And for some families, they would shop in a different part of town so that they could find who they might assist because they knew in their
Hmm.
affluent community, people weren't going to take their hand out. But they would bring kids to other parts of town. And I tell you, you setting parents up to be the spiritual leader, and it makes all the difference. And what we wanted to do was go, we're not trying to save anyone. We're just simply trying to encourage and bring new life to others as a celebration of the
Hmm.
resurrection in us. So that was
Okay.
some of the messaging, and I was just
Yeah.
trying to make the parents be involved with this. I wasn't looking to get them to commit for all the programmatic stuff as much as I wanted it to be more integrated in their homes.
Yeah. That's so good. This is a little bit of a uh, maybe not a pivot, but just a little side rail here is a lot of church planters in the startup stage and in their work. Um, and I know that's just from our work here at Caneo, find themselves neglecting their family and for the sake of building
Yeah.
a church or getting it to, uh, you know, getting it on its feet. And so, how do you? And you were a church planter, so you understand the dynamics there of balancing family. Would you call it balancing? Like, how do you wrestle with uh, something that needs so much attention in order to get it to walk on its own 2 feet and your family?
Well, number one, I tried to involve them as much as I could.
Yes.
Rather than it being dad's job,
Yep.
I wanted to make ministry and the kingdom part of our life so that they could
Yes.
see the needs. And so when we first started, gosh, we didn't have any facilities. So our the front like hallway or entryway to our home was like a staging area for everyone's donations. This would have been about 2017, a lot of new arrivals
Well,
for immigrants. And I have a truck for better, for worse. And so I was constantly doing deliveries, washer, dryers, sofas, changing tables, all the things, clothes. And I wanted my kids to be a part of that. And so to the extent that they were able. And then the other thing is, as you know, with church planning, you just go, oh, this isn't just getting a team of volunteers who are equally committed. This is about shepherding a group of people in the kingdom of
mm-hmm.
God. So you
Mm-hmm.
really need not just a committed team, but a team with a vision for what we're doing, not just the cheerleader. But
Hmm.
I just don't know if there's a way to get around the fatigue and the burnout. And I don't know if this is helpful, but I just kept reminded, like, for all the times that I felt really threadbare and burnt out, I held on to the theology of resurrection that I can experience new life again.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I had to do some reframing, but also some
Yes,
pacing.
love it.
Hey, Dan, one thing I just wanted to mention, because I was just going to do this probably just this year. The book came out in May, and I kind of wanted to do some real-time feedback and walk
Hmm.
alongside some parents. And there's been a few people that I've just had conversations with that have said, we actually want to join with a few other families and go through this.
Mm.
I think the greatest way to kill a small group is to give it curriculum. So I'm not but what I'm saying is, if you really want to go through like a rhythm a month, do the DIY. Each chapter, I have like
Mm.
a finding your rhythm. There's intentional conversations, but from October until May, I'm gonna I'm gonna host something called Equip, encouraging
Mm.
qualities undeveloped in parents so that we're able to have a pastoral conversation in real time about what you're experiencing in your home,
Yes.
missionally,
Wow.
kingdom, and if parents wanted to be a part of it. But here's the other thing that I wanted to do because I just finished 3 years of doctoral research, and and one of the things that like I got to do a deep dive into areas of neuroscience, emotional intelligence, um, cultural transitions, um, spiritual formation. And so I decided like, oh, well, I could like kind of provide a sort of commentary for parents along the way. So just in the chat, if anyone's interested, there's
Right.
stuff on my website, but there's this, I created an Eventbrite thing. I just think like, FDR during 1933 to 44 held these fireside chats. And if
Oh
you think
yeah.
of what was going on then, it was coming out of the Depression, going into World War II. The banks had collapsed, the New Deal initiatives, and he would just get on and he would just host these conversations that would be calming, that would be encouraging, that would speak to a future. And so I want to be able to talk to parents about a shift in parenting from
Mm.
when they're young, you lead through authority, but as they get to adolescence, now you're leading through influence. That's a big change. I want to talk about the digital
Hmm.
revolution that's reshaped culture, where the locus of power has shifted from institutions to individuals. Huge.
Mm.
And I just think there's a lot of ways that parents can just feel like on top of it. So I want to
Yes.
unpack the shape of belonging and identity that's rooted in the natural structure of family relationships. And so I'm just hosting this for either individual families or some small groups that want to be able to do that and have a monthly conversation.
That's great. Yeah, this is a helpful resource, David. That what you shared in that Eventbrite, we'll make sure to get that out to
Oh,
everyone that's listening. But
great. Thanks.
any equipping and championing and support and encouragement to help people navigate the complexity of these times with their kids is just, yeah, it's fresh water in a desert. So thank you, David. So good to have you on. We could go all day. I got all kinds of questions. Maybe I'll ask you those another time.
Yeah, well,
Peace to
thank you
you
so much
all.
for having
You're
me.
welcome. Absolutely. Thanks for all those who attended. And if you are open in considering a church planting, the B3 movement would love to be your home. Peace to you and have a wonderful day.